The judge thought he could humiliate me in his courtroom. He had no idea the junior associate he dismissed held the power to shatter his entire world. The air in courtroom 4B was thick with the smell of old paper and stale coffee, a scent I'd known my entire professional life. It was a grand, cavernous room, with dark wood paneling that had absorbed decades of whispered arguments and damning verdicts. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal pantsuit, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. I was here on short notice. One of my junior prosecutors, Maria, had a family emergency, and this was a sensitive preliminary hearing. I could have sent someone else, of course. I have a whole department for that. But something about the case file, a clear-cut instance of corporate fraud being stonewalled by judicial foot-dragging, had gotten under my skin. I wanted to see it for myself. The bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise," and a stooped, sour-faced man in his late 60s shuffled to the bench. Judge Albright. I knew him by reputation only. Old school, rigid, and with a history of complaints that always seemed to get quietly buried in committee. His watery blue eyes scanned the room with an air of profound boredom before landing on the prosecution's table. On me. A slow, deliberate curl of his upper lip was the first sign. It wasn't a smile. It was a sneer of dismissal. "The state is present?" he asked, his voice a gravelly monotone, though his eyes never left my face. I stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Alani Davis for the state." He squinted, flipping through the papers in front of him as if my presence was a typographical error he needed to correct. "Davis," he repeated slowly, mispronouncing it as Davis, with a hard A. I was expecting Mr. Henderson. He didn't look at me, instead addressing the defense attorney, a slick man in a suit worth more than my first car, who gave a smug little shrug. "Mr. Henderson has been reassigned, Your Honor," I said, my voice even and clear. "I will be handling this case going forward." Judge Albright finally deigned to look at me directly. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his steepled fingers. The sneer deepened. "You will you?" He let the words hang in the air, a thick, suffocating silence filling the room. "Counselor, you look a bit green to be handling a case of this magnitude. Are you sure you're in the right place? The public defender's office is down the hall." The defense attorney coughed out a laugh he barely tried to conceal. The court reporter's fingers froze over her keys. I felt a familiar hot prickle of anger at the back of my neck, but I'd learned long ago to lock it down, to turn it into fuel. I kept my expression placid, my posture ramrod straight. "I am quite sure I'm in the right place, Your Honor," I replied, my tone bordering on icy. "Are you now?" Albright leaned back, a look of mock contemplation on his face. He scanned me from head to toe, his gaze lingering in a way that was meant to be intimidating. "Well, the DA's office must be getting desperate, scraping the bottom of the barrel these days. No offense, of course." "None taken," I said, though my every nerve screamed offense. This was a calculated performance, designed to throw me off balance, to make me seem small and incompetent, before I'd even presented my first motion. I'd seen it 100 times, but it never got less infuriating. "Good," he grunted. "Now, let's get on with this. State's motion to compel—" He picked up my filing, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a soiled tissue. He pretended to read it for a moment before tossing it back on his desk. "This is sloppy work, Counselor," thinly argued. "I'm not inclined to grant it. In fact, I'm considering dismissing it outright. We can't have the court's time wasted with frivolous motions from junior associates." He was baiting me. The motion was airtight, backed by 3 separate precedents, a fact I knew he was perfectly aware of. He wasn't attacking my work. He was attacking my right to even be here, my right to hold this position, to stand in this room, to wear this suit. With all due respect, Your Honor, I began, my voice dangerously quiet. The motion is based on the precedent set in a case you yourself presided over 5 years ago, State versus Sterling Holdings. Perhaps you recall it. A flash of genuine anger crossed his face. I had called his bluff. The smug look on the defense attorney's face faltered. Judge Albright's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He glared at me, his eyes cold and hard. He saw my confidence not as competence, but as insolence. He slammed his gavel down, the crack echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. "That's enough," he boomed, his face turning a blotchy red. "I will not be lectured in my own courtroom by some affirmative action hire who clearly doesn't know her place. I don't know who sent you here, little lady, but they made a grave mistake." He leaned forward, a triumphant smirk returning to his face as he prepared to deliver what he thought was the final blow. He was going to humiliate me, make an example out of me. "I want your supervisor's name. I want to know who exactly is responsible for this spectacle. Tell me, Miss Davis," he sneered, drawing out my name. "Just who do you answer to?" The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Every eye was on me. The defense attorney's smugness had frozen into a mask of morbid curiosity. The court reporter's hands hovered over her machine, ready. Judge Albright leaned forward, his watery eyes glinting with malicious triumph, waiting for the name of some junior supervisor he could call and chew out. He wanted to break me. I let the silence hang for 1 beat longer, holding his gaze without flinching. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, and when I spoke, my voice was perfectly level, carrying to every corner of the grand, empty-feeling room. "Who do I answer to, Your Honor?" I repeated his question, letting the words settle. "I answer to the people of this state." I paused, letting that sink in before delivering the final, quiet blow. "As does every prosecutor in my department. I am Alani Davis, the Attorney General." The words landed with the force of a physical impact. The air crackled. The judge's triumphant smirk didn't just disappear. It collapsed. The blotchy red in his cheeks drained away, replaced by a ghastly, papery white. His mouth fell open, and for a moment he looked like a fish, gasping for air on the deck of a boat. The slick defense attorney went rigid, his eyes wide with a dawning horror, as if he'd just realized he was standing next to a lightning rod in the middle of a thunderstorm. The only sound in the entire courtroom was the frantic, impossibly loud clacking of the court reporter's keys, documenting his career's implosion in real time. I, Judge Albright stammered, his gravelly voice now a thin, reedy whisper. He fumbled with the papers on his desk, his hands suddenly clumsy. "Attorney, General, there must be some mistake. The file says—" I had no idea. "A mistake?" I asked, taking a single, deliberate step forward, my hands resting on the smooth wood of the prosecution table. "The only mistake here, Judge, is your flagrant disregard for the code of judicial conduct." I let my eyes sweep from his pale face to the defense attorney, who was now trying to make himself as small as possible. "Would you have called a white prosecutor little lady? Would you have accused Mr. Henderson of being an affirmative action hire? Would you have dismissed his meticulously prepared motion as sloppy before even reading the first sentence?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The weight of my office was doing all the shouting for me. "Your Honor," I continued, my voice as sharp and cold as a shard of glass, "your behavior on the bench today was not just insulting, it was prejudicial. It demonstrates a bias that calls into question your fitness to wear that robe. I've read the whispers in the files, the quiet complaints that go nowhere, but seeing it myself is something else entirely." Panic flared in Albright's eyes. He saw his cushy pension, his portrait on the wall, his entire legacy turning to dust. He scrambled for a lifeline. his sycophantic instincts kicking into high gear. "General Davis, I misspoke. Terribly. An old man's poor attempt at humor. My sincerest apologies to you and your office." He grabbed my motion from his desk, holding it up as a peace offering. "And this motion, on second look, I see I was hasty. The argument is sound. Brilliantly argued, in fact. Motion to compel is granted, of course. Granted with prejudice." He beamed at me, a desperate, sweaty smile. He thought that was it. He thought he could grant my motion, placate me, and this whole ugly incident would be swept under the rug just like all the others. He thought I was just another problem to be managed. He was wrong. I gave a small, humorless shake of my head. The victory felt hollow, because the prize was never just about compelling discovery in a fraud case. It was about the rot in the system he represented. "Thank you, Judge," I said. The politeness a weapon in itself. "But your ruling on the motion is no longer my primary concern here." I gathered my briefcase, my movements calm and measured. His pathetic smile faltered, confusion and fear warring on his face. He watched me as if I were a bomb he'd just realized was about to detonate. I turned slightly, ensuring the court reporter could hear every word clearly. "This hearing is over," I announced. "But this matter is not. Your blatant recorded bias has irrevocably tainted this proceeding, and I will not allow any case my office prosecutes to be adjudicated by a judge who has demonstrated such profound prejudice." I looked him square in the eye, letting him see the absolute resolve there. "Consider this my formal notice. I am personally filing a petition with the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. I'm not just asking for your recusal from this case, Judge. I am demanding your immediate suspension from the bench." Judge Albright's face went from paper white to a shade of mottled gray. The word suspension echoed in the silent courtroom like a death knell. For a man like him, the robe wasn't a symbol of justice, it was a shield of invincibility. And I had just ripped it away. His mouth opened and closed silently, the sputtering engine of his authority finally out of fuel. The bailiff, a man who had likely stood by and watched this judge demean countless others, now looked at him with an expression of cold pity. "You can't do that," Albright finally choked out, the words lacking any conviction. It was a plea, not a statement of fact. "Watch me," I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. I turned and nodded to the court reporter. "I'll be requesting a certified copy of the transcript immediately." She gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod back, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something that looked a lot like admiration. Without another glance at the crumbling man on the bench, I walked out of courtroom 4B. The heavy wooden doors closed behind me with a decisive thud. My footsteps echoed in the marble hallway. My heart was pounding, not with anger anymore, but with a fierce, cold resolve. This wasn't just about Judge Albright. He was a symptom of a much deeper disease, a culture of entitlement and prejudice that festered in the shadowed corners of the justice system. It was the reason I had fought so hard to get where I was, to hold the power not just for myself, but for every person who had ever been dismissed, belittled, or denied a fair hearing because of what they looked like or where they came from. The news traveled through the courthouse like a shockwave. Before I even got back to my office, my phone was buzzing incessantly with texts and calls from my senior staff. The petition was filed within the hour, my signature bold and clear at the bottom. It wasn't just a petition. It was a declaration of war on the old guard. I attached my own sworn affidavit detailing the events, quoting Albright's words verbatim from my memory, which I knew the transcript would corroborate perfectly. The Commission on Judicial Conduct, often criticized for its sluggishness, moved with unprecedented speed. My office, the Attorney General's office, filing a formal complaint against a sitting judge was a political earthquake. There was no burying this one in committee. Albright was immediately suspended pending a full investigation. His cases were reassigned. The story leaked, of course. The headline was sensational. Attorney General accuses veteran judge of bias in open court. The backlash from his supporters was swift but feeble. They called me an activist, a radical, power-hungry. They said I was politicizing the judiciary. I ignored them. The truth was on the record, typed out in black and white on the court transcript. My inbox was also flooded with messages of support from public defenders, young prosecutors, and even defense attorneys who had long suffered under Albright's tyrannical reign. More importantly, messages poured in from ordinary people, telling me their own stories of feeling small and unheard in a courtroom. 3 months later, the commission issued its ruling. The evidence was irrefutable. My testimony, combined with the transcript and a sudden flood of past complaints from lawyers who now felt emboldened to speak, painted a damning portrait of a man unfit for the bench. Judge Albright was given a choice: face a public, humiliating removal hearing, or retire immediately, forfeiting a significant portion of his pension. He chose retirement. He vanished from the courthouse without so much as a farewell party, his portrait quietly removed from the gallery of judges. The fraud case was reassigned to a young, sharp judge, a woman of color who treated every person in her courtroom with unwavering respect. We won the motion to compel. The corporation's stonewalling collapsed, and they settled for a figure that made headlines, with full restitution paid to their victims. But my real victory wasn't in that settlement. It was in the hushed conversations I overheard in the courthouse hallways in the weeks that followed. It was in the new, almost imperceptible shift in the way certain old-school judges looked at the young, diverse prosecutors from my office. There was a little less condescension, a little more respect. A quiet understanding had been reached. The rules had changed. The bottom of the barrel, as Albright had so crudely put it, was now running the whole damn ship. And we would no longer tolerate being told our place. We were here to define it.